Thank you very much, panelists. I think you have provided a lot of information and some very mind-boggling thoughts on issues that we need to go back to our drawing board and start thinking about. I have just a small comment, because when you look at value chain, it's a very complex process. It's even complex than human beings, because we humans are very complex. If you look at the case of Nigeria, where you said there are so many elements that constrain the activities the organization is doing, since you are not actively in production. Now you are having a model in your production, just try to experiment something that could be replicated in some other area. My question is, one of the most serious problems I have seen across many African countries is energy. How does that constrain the activities within your processing, your production, and even storage of some of these agri-produce, when we know that the shelf life of most of these food are just very tiny? If you can't preserve them, they are all gone. That's just my small intervention.
Okay, thank you very much. I will have maybe comments on two things, one to Affion and the other to the other comments. Well, first, I would like to just maybe shed some light and then maybe explain to you. In Nigeria, two things happen as far as fruits are concerned. One is that the problem is not necessarily the production of fruits. Sometimes some of these fruits grow naturally. Some of them, they are of good quality, because we have an institute, one of the pioneer institutes in West Africa, Nigerian Institute for Horticultural Crop. They produce a lot of fruit. They have crops that are even less than 5 years, that germinate less than 5 years, and they are always there producing them. Recently, they got funding from Orange Knowledge Program, TMT, which about 400,000 euros for that. So I'm just saying that there are organizations, not East-West Seed, that produce high quality varieties of fruits for horticultural crop. So I don't know to what extent have you collaborated or communicated with this organization. Then two, the problems of fruits or horticultural crops generally in Nigeria is not necessarily the issue of production, as I've mentioned. In North Central Nigeria, we have the highest concentration of fruits produced in Benue, Nasarawa, where they grow beautifully well. And often at times, the integrated farms are exported. Some of the fruits are imported from those farms outside the country. So I'm saying that the major challenge they are facing, you come to many of the bulking markets in North and even many parts of Lagos where fruits are supplied. It's not the issue of probably production, but the issue of the logistics and preservation, as I previously mentioned by Dr. Stephen. I think if I will advise, I will concentrate more on how to provide energy, logistics and transporting them, and making sure that they can stay longer. The varieties of good quality. We have many organizations working in Nigeria doing that. So perhaps maybe you look inward in that area, and then you can maybe move forward from there. But production, because of the insecurity and other things, and the perennial nature of the crop, may tend to limit your activities. That's just to that. Now, Sam.
Thank you.
My last comment maybe is regarding the the inclusiveness and the issues of input subsidy programs that was discussed. We are all in Nigeria. We are many parts of Africa. We've worked in many parts of Africa. Now, the issue of direct financing or the issue of financing schemes have been introduced severally in Nigeria, in many parts of Africa too, and different organizations, different portfolios have been introduced. In fact, recently, the most recent is the Anchor Borrower program, which has used different models of farmer organizations, rice farmers organizations, and many others. Now, the problem is most of the organizations, as Dr. Gideon would attest to, when we were working in Nigeria, are often in the cities. The representative of farmers, they're often in the cities. They are more political and lobbying group. They had limited connections to the grassroots farmers. Now, recently, African Development Bank, Islamic Development, and International Fund for Agricultural Development are raising a flagship program called the Special Agro-Processing Zones. In Nigeria is one of the flagship country where this has been launched. And the approach they're adopting is this business to farmer approach, because they believe that by having these agricultural transformation centers in rural areas where farmers are actually producing, where they have relative advantage in producing those crops, where you have a lot of loss during a harvest, they are establishing those structural, these rural transformation centers in those areas so that they can have primary processing of those crops, and is produced by farmers themselves, not necessarily the organizations, because of the experience they've had with organizations of farmers in terms of not necessarily representing on their groups. So these are the reasons why I think personally, the business to farmer approach has worked. There are different examples we've given, and I'm sure that if it's not necessarily mutually exclusive, but as I've mentioned, they could be complementary. And I believe this is my submission as far as that's concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Last one.
Yes, I just have a very short question to you, Mrs. Williams. I would take the opportunity that someone like you is here to ask you as a actor, or as a stakeholder of a value chain, how do you see this kind of study? How can you use it? Because we were talking about the contribution to policymaking, but how can you use this kind of research result? Thank you.
Should I start with the responses? I don't mean to spark another debate, but I will first answer the question around production. The amount of product being produced in Nigeria is high, but the quality is extremely low. And to push, again, I think that just exemplifies the work that a business has to do. We do actually have to aggregate fruit and make sure that we're aggregating useful fruit. And that's a job that is an added job for us, just because we cannot count on the quality of fruit that we get from farm to farm. So while the production is high, most of the fruit that we need to use is not there. It's just not of the quality that makes commercial sense for us to use. So there's an added job to do that. That's why we feel that focusing at the primary side and kind of fixing the problem from starting with quality fruit helps us actually aggregate more. So for our purpose, by the way, and we're not the only fruit producers. I mean, the largest fruit processor in Nigeria at the time closed down because they couldn't get quality fruit. So it's not just the volume, and that's a big issue. In terms of energy, our product is, trying to solve the energy problem by converting fresh fruit to a more higher shelf life product. So I don't have the answer for we face the impact, but for us, what we try to do is, sort of get the fruit from source, and we take more responsibility for sort of increasing its shelf life through handling it post-harvest and then processing it. And that is in our interest, because if the fruit gets too ripe, we can't use it. So we are sort of accommodating that by our business model, which again is not not easy, but something we have to figure out to get quality raw material. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for for how the energy sort of solution is solved at the rural level. It's extremely difficult to deploy. And the last question posed to me is around research. This is a great question, because for us, one of the big roles we see is actually deploying different tactics to improve productivity on the farms and improve quality. And we've had to lean a lot on research done in several West African countries, and that data has been very helpful to us. But if we could get more granular data to support the kind of unique, I would say, topography of farming in Nigeria, that would be even more helpful, because then I think we would sort of leapfrog the time it takes to do a lot of trials and testing to be able to deploy solutions to farmers.
Thank you.
Just one question directed at me, I believe. It's farmers' organizations that are resident in cities that are not as close as possible to their constituencies. I think we need to be mindful of the fact that there are different types of farmers' organizations. There are lobby advocacy type of farmers' organizations who actually have to reside very close to policymakers. So being in town is not necessarily the issue for those, because their business is to engage with policymakers. but there are commodity associations and district associations who are closer to their members. So the selection and targeting of which farmers organizations, they are also cooperatives. So one really has to look at what type of organization are we looking for, rather than maybe brushing it to say farmers organizations are in town and they are very far away from. They are in town for a purpose, and some execute that purpose very well, and those that are also close to the ground. So it is about targeting, segregating, and selecting the right type of farmer organization. So that's the first point. The second point really is about also targeting and segregating who is the farmer you are targeting. And they are commercially oriented farmers who require commercial instruments for support. There are those that might require them to produce food with less drudgery and with more dignity and much more nutritious food. They require a different instrument. The moment you use one instrument, commercial instrument for that, to deal with them, then don't blame them when it does not work. Blame yourself for having used the wrong instrument in targeting. And just to take advantage of a question about the value of research to the midstream, that same research is also valuable to the primary producers as well, to the farmers. What meanings do we discern from this research? It actually empowers us. This is part of the reason why I was now sort of cheekily inviting you to also invite us to co-create the research questions so that we can answer some of our questions. That requires evidence that would come to bear with the kind of policy changes that we are trying to advocate for. And the last point really is this one, that sometimes researchers think that evidence or data speaks for itself. Many times it doesn't. It's right, it needs the right speaker. The one that is generated the researcher might not be the best person to go and communicate with the policymaker. Perhaps the farmer organization is better armed with that kind of research to go to the policymaker. So also be careful about being the champions of generating evidence and also being the communicator of it. Those two things can be different and can be more effective if you select, provided the one you are selecting is buying the same story and love that evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the panel has provided a rich level of comments, of proposal and so on, but still we are far from having answered to all the questions. The question of the panel were very ambitious. Feasibility and challenge of upgrading policies still remain a bit uncompleted, and I think we'll have to come back on this tomorrow. The same on effectiveness of win-win situation and the entry point. And we have to keep this question in the back. It's our value chain work can become more socially inclusive by benefiting a greater number of poor and by securing their participation in the market. This has to keep in our mind. But I think for the time we had, we have gone quite far, and I thank you very much.